Jason Harper stirred awake at 6:15 a.m., the soft, relentless patter of Seattle rain tapping against the double-paned window of their two-story home in Capitol Hill. The room was cloaked in the muted gray of early dawn, the kind of light that seemed to apologize for intruding. He reached over to silence the insistent chirp of his phone alarm, his fingers brushing the cool glass screen, and turned his head to the right. There lay Caitlin, his wife of 6 years, still lost in sleep. Her blonde hair, a cascade of loose waves, spilled across the white pillowcase like a painter's careless stroke. Her face, softened by slumber, held a quiet beauty, high cheekbones, a faint dusting of freckles across her nose, that still made his chest tighten with a mix of awe and gratitude. She was his constant, the steady pulse beneath the chaos of their shared life. He slid out of bed, wincing as his bare feet met the cold hardwood floor, the chill seeping into his toes. The house was silent save for the rain, a familiar soundtrack to their mornings. Downstairs, he navigated the narrow hallway lined with framed photos, their wedding day, a blurry shot from a hike in the Cascades, a candid of Caitlin laughing at a barbecue, and entered the kitchen. It was Wednesday midweek, which meant another day of wrangling shipping schedules and placating clients at his logistics job downtown. Caitlin, meanwhile, freelanced as an interior designer, her office a cluttered corner of their living room strewn with fabric swatches and mood boards. He loved that she worked from home. It meant mornings like this, slow and intimate, her presence a tether to something softer than his fluorescent-lit office. The coffee maker gurgled to life as he scooped grounds into the filter, the rich, earthy scent filling the air. He flicked on the small countertop TV, a hand-me-down from his parents, and the local news flickered to life. A perky anchor in a bright blazer chirped about the forecast, rain all week, no surprise there, and a tech startup unveiling some drone delivery gimmick. Jason barely registered it, stirring cream into his mug with a chipped spoon, his thoughts drifting to the weekend. Caitlin had been off lately, her usual spark dimmed. Her smiles came less often, her eyes darting away when he tried to catch them. He chalked it up to stress. Her clients could be demanding, but he wanted to shake her out of it. A dinner date, he decided, at Rossi's, their favorite Italian spot downtown. Candlelight, pasta, maybe a bottle of red, she'd love that. He carried her coffee upstairs, the mug warm against his palms, and found her stirring. She propped herself up on one elbow, her blue eyes blinking against the dim light, and offered a sleepy smile that didn't quite reach them. "Morning, you," she murmured, her voice husky with sleep as she took the mug, her fingers brushing his. "Morning, beautiful," he replied, leaning down to press a kiss to her forehead, her skin soft and faintly floral from her night cream. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah," she said, sipping the coffee, but her tone was clipped, a faint edge he couldn't place. She wasn't a morning person, never had been, so he let it slide. They talked for a few minutes, perched on the edge of the bed, the rain a steady hum outside. He mentioned a meeting with a new supplier. She nodded and spoke vaguely of a nursery redesign for a client, her words clipped and distracted. He pulled on his work clothes, a pressed shirt, slacks, a tie he hated, kissed her again, and headed out, the rhythm of their life humming along as it always had. Or so he believed. Jason was hunched over his desk at 10:22 a.m., the office buzzing with the low hum of keyboards and muffled phone calls. His cubicle, a gray box wedged between a ficus plant and a window with a view of a brick wall, was littered with post-its and coffee-stained reports. He was midway through sorting a tangle of delivery schedules, trucks delayed by a mudslide on I-5, when his phone buzzed against the desk, rattling a pen off the edge. A text from Trevor Marshall, his oldest friend since high school and weekend basketball teammate. "Dude, you gotta see this." "Weird as hell." A blue hyperlink glowed beneath the words. Jason smirked, assuming it was another of Trevor's finds, maybe a clip of a dog skateboarding or a conspiracy rant about Bigfoot. He clicked, his thumb smudging the screen, and waited as the page loaded over the office's sluggish Wi-Fi. When it did, his smirk faded. The screen filled with an OnlyFans profile, a platform he'd heard of in passing, something about creators selling content, right? A woman posed in black lingerie, her face half hidden by a curtain of dark hair that fell over one shoulder. The photo was soft focus, artsy almost, but unmistakably intimate. He scrolled, his brow furrowing. More images loaded, some bolder, her hands tracing the curve of her hips, others teasingly cropped, and a bio popped up. Hey there, step into my world. Subscribe for the good stuff. He leaned back in his chair, puzzled. Why the hell had Trevor sent this? He fired off a text. Why am I looking at this crap? Trevor's reply pinged back in seconds. Check the details. Doesn't it look familiar? Jason's stomach lurched, a cold prickle creeping up his spine. He reopened the link, his fingers clumsy on the touchscreen, and zoomed in on the first photo. His eyes snagged on a detail, a small star tattoo on her thigh, no bigger than a quarter, its edges slightly faded. Caitlin had one just like it, inked on a whim during a weekend trip to Portland 4 years ago. He'd been there, holding her hand as the needle buzzed, laughing when she winced and swore she'd never do it again. His breath caught, shallow and sharp. He scrolled again, heart hammering against his ribs. Another photo showed a sliver of background, a pale blue wall, a painting of abstract tulips in muted yellows and greens. Their bedroom. He'd hung that painting himself, a thrift store find Caitlin adored. His hands shook as he fumbled to close the tab, the office noise fading to a dull roar in his ears. It couldn't be her. Caitlin, his Caitlin, who blushed at dirty jokes and wore oversized sweaters on lazy Sundays, wouldn't do this. But the tattoo, the room, they weren't coincidences. He rubbed his temples, the fluorescent lights overhead suddenly too bright. The day dragged on in a haze, meetings he nodded through, emails he typed on autopilot. His mind churned, replaying every odd moment, her late nights, working, at her desk, her phone angled away when she texted, her vague answers about money when he'd asked how they'd afforded that new dishwasher. Pieces he'd dismissed now snapped into a jagged puzzle. He needed proof, something concrete, before he could face her. But the doubt had taken root, a splinter he couldn't ignore. Jason pulled into their driveway at 6:35 p.m., the sky a bruised purple as dusk settled over Capitol Hill. The house glowed warm through the front windows, a beacon against the damp chill. He sat in his car for a moment, keys jingling in his hand, the engine ticking as it cooled. Inside, he found Caitlin in the kitchen, her sleeves rolled up as she diced onions on a wooden cutting board. The air was thick with the scent of garlic and simmering herbs, a pot of spaghetti sauce bubbling on the stove. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, a few strands escaping to frame her face, and she glanced up as he dropped his bag by the door. "Hey, hon," she said, her smile tight, not quite reaching her eyes. "Hey," he replied, shrugging off his coat and hanging it on the rack. He studied her, the way she moved, quick and precise, the faint tension in her shoulders. Was she nervous? Hiding something? Or was he projecting, seeing shadows where there were none? "How was work?" she asked, turning back to the stove to stir the sauce, her voice light but clipped. "Fine. Busy," he said, leaning against the counter. "Yours?" "Busy too," she answered, not looking up. "Client stuff piling up, deadlines, you know." She waved a hand vaguely, a gesture he'd seen 1,000 times, but now it felt evasive. He nodded, his throat dry, and poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher on the counter, the ice clinking against the glass. They ate dinner in near silence, spaghetti and garlic bread, a bottle of cheap red wine, her eyes on her plate, his on her. When she excused herself to shower, muttering about needing to wash off the day, he seized the moment. Her laptop sat on the dining table, lid half open, its screen dark. She'd never used a password. Trust, she'd said, was the bedrock of their marriage. Now that trust felt like a taunt. Guilt gnawed at him as he opened it, the screen flickering to life, but he pushed it down. He had to know. He clicked into her browser, the history loading in a neat column. Pinterest boards of mid-century furniture, a blog about sustainable fabrics, a few online stores for throw pillows, nothing unusual. But the last 3 days were blank, wiped clean. His pulse quickened, a bead of sweat forming at his hairline. She'd covered her tracks. He closed the laptop, his mind racing, and then remembered her old phone. She'd retired it last year after upgrading, tossing it into the bedroom dresser as a backup. He slipped upstairs, the shower's hum echoing down the hall, and rummaged through the drawer, socks, a scarf, a tangle of chargers, until his fingers closed around the cool metal of the device. He powered it on, the screen glowing faintly, and typed their anniversary, August 8th. It unlocked with a soft chime. His breath hitched as he scrolled the apps, landing on OnlyFans, its icon a stark white against the dark background. He opened it, hands trembling, and the profile loaded, the same one Trevor had sent. The photo stared back, Caitlin in lingerie, her poses confident, her body framed by their bedroom's familiar walls. An alias email, something generic, not her usual, linked to her PayPal, her full name unmistakable in the account details. And the messages, dozens, hundreds, a flood of them. You're a goddess. More pics, please. Worth every penny. His stomach twisted, bile rising in his throat. He sank onto the bed, the phone heavy in his hand, as the shower shut off. The woman he'd vowed to love forever had built a secret life, and he'd been blind to it. Jason didn't sleep that night. The old phone screen burned into his retinas even after he'd powered it off and shoved it back into the drawer. He lay beside Caitlin, her breathing slow and even, and stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks he'd never noticed before. His mind was a storm, anger, betrayal, confusion crashing together. Why hadn't she told him? How long had she lived this double life? By morning, his eyes were gritty, his head throbbing, and he called in sick, mumbling about a migraine to his boss. Caitlin woke at 8:30, stretching beside him, oblivious to the war in his chest. You okay? She asked, brushing a hand over his forehead. Just a headache, he lied, forcing a smile. I'll rest. She nodded, kissed him lightly, and left at 9:15 for a client consultation, her purse slung over her shoulder, her goodbye distracted. He waited, pacing the kitchen, the old phone now on the island like a silent accusation. The rain outside was a steady drum, matching the thud of his heart. She returned at 12:47 p.m., her coat dripping as she shook it out by the door. She stopped dead when she saw the phone, her keys clattering onto the side table. Jason, what's going on? Her voice wavered, her eyes darting from the device to his face. I know, he said, standing from the stool he'd been perched on, his voice low but steady despite the chaos inside. About OnlyFans. Your profile. How long have you been doing this? Her face drained of color, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing again. She sank into a chair across from him, hands twisting in her lap, silent for a beat too long. I was going to tell you, she finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. Tell me what? His control snapped, hurt and fury spilling out. That you're stripping for strangers? That you've been lying to me every damn day? It's not like that, she shot back, her head snapping up, eyes flashing with defiance. It started a year ago, Jason. We were struggling, your hours got cut, my clients stopped paying. We were behind on everything, and I didn't know what else to do. You could have talked to me, he roared, slamming a hand on the counter, the sting radiating up his arm. We're supposed to be partners, Caitlin. Not you sneaking around behind my back. I didn't want you to feel like you weren't enough, she said, tears brimming, her voice breaking. You were killing yourself at work, coming home exhausted, beating yourself up over bills. I thought I could fix it quietly, take the pressure off. His chest ached, her words slicing through his anger to expose the shame beneath. He'd felt the weight of those months, the pay cut after his company downsized, the late notices piling up, the nights he'd lain awake calculating how to stretch their savings. He thought they'd weathered it together, but she'd carried this alone. So you, what? Started selling yourself? His voice cracked, softer now, raw. She flinched, wiping her eyes. It wasn't like that. It started small, lingerie shots, nothing crazy. I thought it'd be quick cash, a one-time thing. Then people subscribed, hundreds of them, and the money just kept coming. She looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of the table. It paid for the car repair when the transmission blew. That trip we took for our anniversary. The new couch you love. I got caught up in it, Jason. I didn't mean for it to go this far. He listened, his knees weak, and sank back onto the stool. The room spun as she laid it bare, thousands of dollars, a secret income woven into their life. They argued for hours, shouting until their throats were hoarse, sobbing into silences that stretched too long. She pulled out her laptop, logged in, and deleted the account as he watched, her fingers trembling as she clicked confirm. It's gone, she said, voice small. I'll stop. I swear. But the betrayal lingered, a ghost he couldn't banish. The next month was a tightrope walk over a chasm. Jason couldn't erase the images, his wife in poses he'd never seen, her body a commodity for faceless subscribers. He'd wake from nightmares of her laughing with strangers, her voice echoing in a void. Caitlin tried to mend it. She left her phone unlocked, shared her emails, sat him down for talks that stretched late into the night. I'm here, she'd say, her hand reaching for his. I'm still me. But he'd pull back, the warmth of her touch tainted by doubt. Every ping of her phone made him flinch. Every late night at her desk sparked a question he couldn't voice. Was she lying again? She'd shown him the deleted profile, the canceled PayPal transactions, the empty inbox where subscriber messages once flooded. Yet the rift widened, a silent fracture splitting their once solid ground. He'd catch her watching him, her eyes pleading for forgiveness, and he'd try to muster a smile, but it never felt real. They started therapy in mid-April, driving to a small office downtown where Dr. Ellis, a soft-spoken woman with graying hair, guided them through the wreckage. Trust takes time, she said, her pen tapping a notepad. It's not a switch you flip. Jason nodded, wanting to believe it, but the hurt ran deep, a bruise that throbbed with every memory. He loved Caitlin, her laugh that crinkled her nose, her habit of humming off-key while cooking, the way she'd curl into him on cold nights. But love felt fragile now, a cracked vase leaking water he couldn't catch. Friends noticed the strain. Trevor cornered him after a Saturday game, sweat beading on his forehead as they sat on the bleachers. You okay, man? You're off. Barely said 2 words today. Jason shrugged, sipping from a water bottle, the plastic crinkling in his grip. Just tired, he muttered, but Trevor's frown said he wasn't fooled. At home, Caitlin threw herself into her real work, landing new clients, a doctor's office redo, a kitchen overhaul, proving she could let go of the past. She'd show him sketches over dinner, her voice bright with forced cheer, but he'd nod absently, his mind elsewhere. By late May, the tension was a living thing, coiling around them like smoke. Jason couldn't breathe in it anymore, the constant second-guessing, the weight of her secret still pressing on his chest. On a rainy Thursday evening, he sat her down in the living room, the couch creaking under him as he set his coffee mug on the table. The rain outside was a steady drum, a mirror to the thudding in his ears. I need space, he said, his voice low, steady despite the ache behind it. I can't keep doing this, watching you, wondering. Caitlin's face crumpled, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater. Jason, I'm sorry, she said, tears spilling over. I'll keep trying whatever you need. I don't want to lose us. I know, he replied, his throat tight, eyes burning. I don't either. But I need to figure out if I can get past this, and I can't do that here. She nodded, a sob catching in her chest, and he stood, the room tilting slightly. He packed a duffel bag upstairs, jeans, shirts, his toothbrush, each item a small cut. Downstairs, she watched from the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, as he slung the bag over his shoulder. I love you, she whispered, and he paused, the words a lifeline he couldn't grab. "I love you too," he said, meaning it, but turned and walked out. He moved into Trevor's spare room the next day, a cramped space with a futon and a window overlooking a soggy backyard. The house he'd left behind felt like a stranger's, its walls holding echoes of a life he wasn't sure he could reclaim. They weren't done, not divorced, not shattered beyond repair, but paused, suspended in a gray uncertainty. He still saw their future in flashes, her smile, their laughter, a life rebuilt. But for now, he chose distance, driving away as rain streaked the windshield, hoping time would light the path ahead.